Russell Westbrook. You love the Philadelphia Eagles. Let me get a hell yeah!
What's up, guys? Welcome to another edition of Party on Broad. It is Dives, Mr. Crockpot on Twitter. Today we are talking about the NHL draft, and joining me today is Tyson Quibell. Follow him on Twitter at Quibell Tyson. Check out his top 100 NHL draft prospects article over at thepaintedlines.com. If you love the NHL draft, you love Flyers, you love the whole NHL, I strongly recommend you check this out. Super, super long. But my man, Tyson, how you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well, getting fired up. You know, there's some positivity going on here with the Flyers and the NHL possibly resuming. All right, but today we are talking about the NHL draft, and we are talking about 5'9" center Marco Rossi from Austria, man. I don't know about you, dude, but
Yep.
When you think of elite hockey talent, you don't normally think of Austria, at least from my perspective. Tell us a little bit about Marco Rossi and who is this guy as a hockey player?
Yeah, so you're not wrong in thinking that. There hasn't been too many well-known Austrian NHL players. So Thomas Vanek, who's just out of the league, he was one that was highly successful, but he played a lot of his hockey in Minnesota before getting drafted. And then Michael Grabner of the Arizona Coyotes is another one. But in general, there's just not many. You're absolutely right. And Rossi might change that in many ways in terms of Vanek was a superstar in his day. I'm not sure if Rossi will be a superstar, but he is a elite, skilled player in that we previously had talked about him. Really, really fast skater. And if you're in general small and fast, that's a good combination. If you're small and not super fast, at least from an NHL scouting standpoint, that's not as great. There's some exceptions to that. I think Cole Caulfield last year, he's listed at like 5'7" or 5'8" when he got drafted, was considered an average skater roughly. And that likely bumped him out of the top 10, even though he had set goal records in the league that he was in. For Rossi, he's considered probably an average skater as well. So he's not dynamic, but he's extremely smart. He's highly intelligent, and he just manages to create plays and create offense. I mean, he's a top offensive producer in the OHL. He does really well in tight spaces. So even though he maybe won't blow you away with his top speed, he finds ways to use his edges well. Has a good read on where defensemen are at and how to expose their weaknesses when he's in really close. And so a lot of the goals that you'll see him score will be kind of close in through a cycle game or just kind of puck moving ability and elite hockey sense to just kind of make plays out of nothing in close. And so he's just very dynamic offensively, even though he maybe doesn't have that same wow factor that other players do.
Awesome. So let's move on to strengths about Marco Rossi. And from the small tape and small research I've done on the scouting reports on this guy, this dude seems to be pretty elite in a lot of different areas. This seems to be like one of the more well-balanced prospects in the NHL draft. Tell us a little bit about Marco Rossi's strengths at the next level, Tyson.
Yeah, that puts it really well. I mean, there's not anything he really does badly. I think we'll talk about weaknesses, but I think defensive game is something that gets brought up occasionally. But in terms of all like speed, on ice awareness, things like that, like I think you would put a lot of those as like very high or high, and instead of like necessarily elite. But he does everything really well. He just always seems to have this knowledge of who is on the ice. He utilizes all his teammates well. One of the things that you like to see in a center like him, and I think he could be a center at the NHL level, is that if you use everyone on the ice frequently, like you're not afraid to use everybody, that's a positive sign. It means you are creative. You know who is where at all times. Nolan Patrick, ironically enough, of the Flyers, when he was in junior before all these issues happened, he was one of my favorites to watch do that, where sometimes he would use pass to a defenseman in such a way that he would almost surprise them. Because they just weren't expecting it, and yet he was trying to utilize them to create space to create offense. And so Rossi will do the same. And so that's a huge positive for him. He just has this high skill set. He may not be elite in every single category other than hockey sense, but he uses this toolkit to produce points in a pretty amazing fashion. So I've been high on him. I think my preliminary list, I had him as a top 10, most people had him outside their top 10. Now most have him at least within the top 10.
Wow.
So he's just been someone that's been on my radar for a while. I've been a fan. Even just watching, I like watching him play. It's unique.
You touched on the defensive deficiencies. Like, what are some areas that Marco Rossi needs to improve on, dude?
Yeah, I think it's just awareness. He likes to be on full go on offense. So there's times when he could be just more aware, in particular of the neutral zone. That's something everyone's always going to say strength for smaller players. One thing that maybe would cause him to drop a little bit is he barely missed last year's draft because of age. So in terms of draft class, when we talked about the number 2 pick, Quentin Byfield was the youngest basically of this draft class. Like I think he was 21 days over the limit. And on the flip side, Rossi's like 21 days from having qualified last year. So in terms of players' age, he has almost a full year development as well on a player like Byfield. And so some of that, sometimes scouts will take that into effect and be like, okay, well, we look at his numbers, like over 120 points, I believe, in the OHL. We might need to prorate that to a 19-year, to a player that's a year older. So maybe we don't take that as much into consideration. But I think if you look at his body of work from last year also, when I started to really pay attention to his game, I think I view this as a positive developmental curve. And even as an older player, his point totals were what you would expect from someone of that age. I mean, if you lead the league that had players even older than him in scoring, that's a positive. So to me, that's not a big detriment. I think I would take into consideration whether or not you think, his size will be detrimental. I don't think it is at the NHL level. I think, again, he'll adapt. He's smart, and those are things that matter the most. And I think a team, if he does drop outside of the top 5, is going to be really lucky to nab him.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, because I guess from our last pod, it sounds like the reseeding of the NHL draft seems to be kind of up in the air. What are some of the best fits? Which NHL teams would be the best fit for Marco Rossi, my man?
Yeah, so I think a team that could really benefit from him, they'll be picking around, again, between the 4 and 6 range, the Anaheim Ducks. They really need some dynamic offense. They are in a rebuild mode. They have Ryan Getzlaf at center. He has never been known for his speed. He's always been a slow power forward type that uses his strength to his advantage. And they just need a more dynamic offensive factor. And so they have the space to put him in a lineup probably within a year. And then they have enough kind of players that are already kind of in their system as prospects or already on their roster that can be good supplemental for him to be eased into a lineup and be productive pretty quickly. So I think they'd be a fit. I don't think he'll still be around by the time they pick, but like the Chicago Blackhawks could really use a dynamic center type. Patrick Kane's been kind of tossed around with different centers over the years. I think playing with a small skilled guy that could be a playmaker to work alongside with him could be really helpful for his game as well. Those are 2 off the top of my head that I think are really good fits.
Do you have a comparison for Marco Rossi?
Oh, I've been debating comparisons on that. I think I've seen some like Jonathan Marchessault, but I don't think he's that fast. Marchessault's on Vegas. And I think he might have a little bit of a higher ceiling than Marchessault. Probably maybe like a Jaden Schwartz, Jonathan Marchessault hybrid. Jaden Schwartz is just a really solid player on St. Louis that does a lot of things well. He was key to their Stanley Cup victory, but he's not someone you're always going to see on SportsCenter highlights across the board. But he puts up points, and I think a hybrid between him and a Marchessault, a smaller type player that just does a lot of things well, creates offense, especially in close as a smaller player. I think those are the closest comparisons.
That is Mr. Tyson Quibell. Check him out on Twitter at QuibellTyson. Check out his top 100 NHL draft prospect ranking. I swear you will absolutely love it. For Tyson, for myself, thanks for watching, guys. Stay awesome.
Sixers win it! Wow! Oh man, and being just posterized, Russell Westbrook.
You love the Philadelphia Eagles. Let me get it. Hell yeah!